Will Jesus deny you before the Father in heaven? In Matthew chapter 10, verses 32 and 33, Jesus says, "Therefore, whoever confesses me before men, him I will confess before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, him I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven." I recently stumbled across a video of Iranian Christian Naghmeh Panahi. She was trying to get her husband, who is also a Christian, out of an Iranian jail, or he was being held by the authorities because of his faith. And she said that she confronted a gentleman who was representing the Iranian authority, and the guy presented her with an option. He said, if you say you're a Muslim, you can pass by without any kind of conflict. But if you say you are a Christian, you're in jeopardy of being raped, tortured, and eventually killed. She stood firm in her faith and said that she was a Christian. And apparently she survived whatever happened to her, because at this point in time, she said that after all the ordeal was done, the gentleman who gave her this option came to her in tears, wanting to have a Bible. So whatever she did eventually struck this man in his heart. And I don't know if he eventually came to faith, but it is an incredible testimony of her faith. Now, people will see this and they'll be both encouraged and possibly discouraged by it. Encouraged because she stood by her faith, and she was apparently rewarded because she didn't get harmed for it. But also they could be discouraged because they could think, they can compare themselves to her and say, I don't know if I could ever do this. And what would God, say if I denied him before men, as the verses from Matthew 10 say. So what does God say about this type of thing in the new covenant? Well, in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 13, it reads, if we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. Well, faithless means to disbelieve, to betray a trust, to be unfaithful. But to be faithful is to be worthy of trust and can be relied on. So in this sense, that even if we are unworthy to God, he remains worthy and faithful to us. That's an encouragement. Then in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 9, it reads, God is faithful, by whom you were called into the fellowship of his Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Again, God is faithful. He is worthy. He is someone we can trust. And fellowship means that we have been called in a joint participation with God, a form of intimacy with him. So he is faithful to us because he has called us into fellowship with him. Then if we look at Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23, it says, let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. So we hold fast to the confession because God is faithful. And confession means something we profess to be ours. We profess God to be ours. And because we do that, he is worthy of our trust. And that is why we confess him, because we know that he is trustworthy and he is faithful to us, that there's no condition on what we do, that he remains faithful because of his promise to be faithful to us. And then finally, the verse I want to talk about is Hebrews 13:5, where it says, let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have. For he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. To leave someone is to send back, to give up, to omit. So God will never send us back, give up on us, or omit us. And when I see the word omit, I think about what it talks about in the book of life, where people get concerned about God will erase you from the book of life. But if he says here, he will never omit you, that is something we can take comfort in, that he will never omit us from the book of life. And then to forsake means to abandon, desert, leave helpless. God will never abandon us. He will never desert us. He will never leave us helpless. That is something to take encouragement by, to be emboldened by, to fall in love with, and how he is faithful to us. And there are many other verses that talk about God's faithfulness to us, that it's unconditional. It's based on his love for us, not on our behavior, so to speak, and if we deny him or not. So what does Matthew 10:32-33 mean? Well, the whole chapter, Matthew 10, talks about, first, Jesus appoints the apostles. That's what you see in Matthew 10:1-4. He appoints the 12 apostles. Then in Matthew 10:5-15, Jesus sends the apostles out. Now, in the context of sending the apostles out, we read in Matthew 10:16-23 how Jesus warns them that they will be persecuted. In verse 16, he talks about he's sending them out as sheep among wolves. And then in verse 17, he says, beware of men who will deliver you to courts and flog you in their synagogues. So these are kind of the people he's sending them out to are the Jews, because he's talking about synagogues in this context. And that they will bring you before governors in Matthew 10:18. But then we see a key verse, Matthew 10:19 and 20. Some verses talk about, don't worry, God will give you the words to say. And it is the Spirit of the Father speaking in you. So when you worry about denying God before men, you can take courage that, well, God will most likely speak for you. So he will give you the courage, the words to say in that sense. And then it goes on to talk about in verse 21 that brothers, fathers, and children will betray each other, that the children will rise up against their parents, the brothers will betray their brothers, and the fathers will betray their children because of Jesus Christ. And then in verse 22, Jesus says that we will be hated by all, the disciples will be hated by all because of his name. And then you also see in verse 22 that he says, the one who endures to the end will be saved. So when it's all over, you will be saved. He's telling the apostles, the disciples, that when this is all over, you will be saved. Many people think that, well, if you don't endure to the end, you won't be saved. No, this is actually Jesus encouraging the disciples that, this will be temporary. The persecution is temporary. And when it's all over, you will be saved. That is what he's telling them. And in the midst of that, he is with you, giving you the words to say, speaking on your behalf, things of that nature. And then from Matthew 10:24 on down to the verse I mentioned, verses 32 and 33, it's more encouragement. He talks about you'll be persecuted because Jesus is persecuted. That should let us know that, well, they're doing this because they persecuted God. So it gives us some context to understand why we're being persecuted. And then we see that not to fear the persecutors because they can only kill the body, where God is the one who can kill both the body and the spirit in hell, or the soul in hell. And then he says that we are valued, comparing us to birds that he takes care of. So those are things that should help us be encouraged in that sense. So when it talks about Matthew 10:32 and 33, those who confess Jesus before men are the disciples. They are the Christians. We are confessing Jesus before men because of our faith, and he's speaking through us and things of that nature. So the ones who Jesus will deny are unbelievers. They're the wolves with the sheep. They're the fathers and brothers and those who hate us. Those are the ones that and betraying us. Those are the ones who are not confessing Jesus before men. They're denying him before men. They don't believe in him. So they're the ones who Jesus will deny. The ones that didn't accept him, that don't believe in him, that have rejected the gospel. So that's what we look at in that context. It's not something to scare us into believing that, oh man, if I get a knife to my neck and somebody says deny Jesus, and if for some reason I do just because I'm scared, it doesn't mean that I'm going to go to hell because Jesus is going to deny me. Jesus is faithful to me regardless of that. But hopefully in the midst of those trials and tribulations, if they do come upon me or you or whoever, he will give us the words to say and the strength to say that. That's what this is all about. And honestly, most of us don't even know what we'll be like in that situation. We may think we'll be bold and we won't. We may think we'll be weak and we'll be strong. We don't know. But we should put our faith in Jesus Christ, our trust in Jesus Christ, because he is faithful. He's not abandoning us. He's not deserting us. Those are the things that he's giving us to encourage us that, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about what happens in those situations. And a good example of this is the Apostle Peter. Peter was one of those who was called in Matthew 10. And what did Peter do? Jesus told Peter to his face, you are going to deny me 3 times. And Peter said, no, I won't. And what happened? Peter denied Jesus 3 times. And he cried and he went away and he was hurt. Did Jesus deny him before the Father? No. Jesus forgave him, restored him. And Peter went on not only to write a couple of books in the Bible and be mentioned about throughout the New Testament. Peter died for the faith. In fact, legend has it that he died upside down. He was crucified upside down because he didn't think he was worthy enough to be killed in the same manner as Jesus, which kind of makes me think that he was still kind of concerned about his denial. But Jesus was faithful to him. God was faithful to him, and he is faithful to us. These verses aren't meant to discourage us. So will Jesus deny you before the Father in heaven? No, because he will not deny himself. He lives inside of you, and because of that, he is not going to deny himself. So be encouraged in that. Don't be afraid. Go out there and get to know your God, and then share him when the opportunity arises. And if for some reason it doesn't, then you can still approach God and find out, why wasn't I strong enough to do that? Why did I deny you? What am I not trusting you with? What am I not believing? That's all it is. It's not said to scare you to death. It's actually talking about people who have already denied Jesus, not the ones who have. Be encouraged by that, and have a good day.